Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our March webinar, Professional Learning, Actionable Steps to Improve Quality and Content. We're going to give folks just a few more minutes to get logged on, but while you're waiting, there's plenty to do. We have the green resource widget, and that has quite a few of the resources that you'll be hearing about tonight, so you can go ahead and explore that. There are some links in there that you can open so you can follow along with what is on the slides. And then there's the blue little group chat widget, and that's where we can all talk to each other. We really like these webinars to be very interactive, feel like we're all in the room together. So if you can introduce yourself by clicking on that group chat button and just telling us your name and what grade you work with, that would be great. And we're going to be using that group chat feature a little bit later on in the webinar to have some group discussion. So that's good practice for using that. So we're just going to wait maybe 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we will get started. All right, well, we have an action-packed webinar tonight, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. You can continue to introduce yourself over in the group chat. Thank you, I see those rolling in. It's so great and exciting to see people from all over the country joining us tonight and getting ready to connect and do some learning together. So again, welcome to the webinar. This webinar will be focused on professional learning and introducing our new professional learning principles to you. So your host for tonight, we have a bit of a change. Pascal is not joining us tonight, but I'll be your host, Claire Rivero. I'm the Digital Strategy Manager here at Student Achievement Partners. And then the main attractions for tonight are our presenters. We have Rochelle Etienne, who's our Vice President here at Student Achievement Partners and who really led the work of developing the professional learning principles that you'll be hearing about tonight. We have Robin McClellan from Tennessee. She's the Supervisor of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction. And we have Mandy Flora, who is a fellow at the Teaching Lab and has some very interesting state work that she'll be sharing with you tonight. So as we begin all of our webinars, we're really curious to hear who we have on the phone tonight, and you've started doing that by introducing yourself in the group chat, but we'd also like to know about the experience you have with attending our webinars. So just go ahead and quickly fill in what amount of webinars seems to reflect best your experience with our Core Advocate webinars. And I'll give everyone just a few minutes to click their response there. Oh, I see over in the group chat before I even give the results that we have a lot of first-timers, which is wonderful. So welcome to all of you. Yeah, and the poll results reflect that. Seems like we have a majority of folks who this is their first webinar, which is great. Welcome to you. And then we also have a mix of folks who've been with us a couple of times before. So that's great. No one cracked the 16 to 20 webinar threshold just yet, but great to see a range of different experiences with our professional learning. So if you are new and this is your first time joining us, this is a Core Advocate webinar, and anyone is welcome to join these webinars. You don't have to be a member of our Core Advocate network, but we do invite you to join us. It's a free network, and there are lots of opportunities. There's a quarterly magazine. There's lots of professional learning opportunities. So we invite you to sign up and register to be a part of that group. If you have more questions about being a part of the Core Advocate Network, you can contact Jenny Beltramini or Joy Delisio Osborne. Their email addresses are there. And as a reminder, you'll get access to all of these slides once the webinar is completed, so no worries about jotting down everything you see here tonight. This will be sent to you. We are active on Twitter, and if you are as well, we invite you to tweet along with us and share what you're learning tonight with your networks online. There are some handles that you can use. We are Achieve the Core on Twitter, so if you want to tag us, you can do that. You can also tag Jenny. She's always interested in what our core advocates are saying. And then please do feel free to use the hashtag core advocates so that we can track the conversation that's happening about the webinar tonight. So a quick overview of what the features are of this webinar platform. So there's the group chat feature. Everyone seems to be a pro with group chat already. I see lots of great conversation happening in the group chat, which is wonderful. And we will be using that again a little bit later on to have some group discussion and sharing of ideas. Then there's the green resources widget. That's the place where you'll find the links to all of the resources that we'll be discussing tonight. And then there's also the Q&A button. This is if you want to send a question directly to one of the presenters. You're having some technical difficulties. I'll do my best to try and respond to them as I can in the Q&A section. And this is also where you will be able to put at any time during the webinar a question you have for one of the presenters that you're hoping that they will be able to answer at the end of the webinar. So we're hopefully going to have some time for Q&A saved at the end. So if you have a question and you don't want to lose it, go ahead and put it in at any time during the webinar, and we'll try and get to it. So the goals of tonight's webinar are to understand the current state of professional learning based on Student Achievement Partners' recent research process. We want to learn about the creation and application of the principles for high-quality standards-aligned professional learning. And we want to get started with some really concrete ideas that are role-based that can improve professional learning. All right, so Rochelle, I think I'm going to kick it over to you to start talking about why we embarked on this work.
Thank you so much for kicking us off, Claire, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Rochelle, and I'm going to kick us off and get you going on the story of how we landed on these principles for professional learning. And I think the best way to tell a story is to start at the beginning. Why did we embark on this work? So historically, Student Achievement Partners, I think I clicked one ahead. Historically, Student Achievement Partners, our work was focused on supporting the implementation of college and career-ready standards. We've always been focused on learning and sharing the research and evidence-based models for how folks all around the country are implementing college and career readiness through instructional materials, instructional practice, assessments, and all types of innovations. And professional learning in many ways has been a priority, especially through our core advocates network that Claire described at the beginning of the webinar. As we worked and learned from educators all across the nation, we heard over and over that educators have a shared experience with professional learning, and the truth is, it's not that good. And we thought about this with the presence now with so many high-quality instructional materials available to educators across the country. There's both a need and an opportunity to rethink our approach to professional learning. What it takes to provide effective and equitable instruction for all students. We have an opportunity to rethink that. What it takes to raise the bar in professional learning. So to get us going, I'd love to know, when was the last time you experienced professional learning that was game-changing for you? And that's going to take us now to our next poll. Okay. And you can just chat this now into the chat box. How often, hold on just a second. I think we are just a little off on our cadence here somewhere. Let me go back. All right, so can you describe what professional learning looks like in one word?
And just a reminder for everyone to use the group chat feature so that we can see everyone's responses and not do the Q&A, although interesting for me to read them, but great to do it in the group chat as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And I asked this question as you all are answering because one of the first steps that we took as an organization was, to think about an approach to learning about professional learning, both through the research and through evidence. And the first step in that process was to empathize. We had the pleasure of learning about an equitable design process through our partners at Equity Meets Design. And they encouraged us to think of ourselves as designers as well as educators, and to ensure that we're using an equity design approach as we address the challenges and make decisions when we're thinking about professional learning. This illustration that is up right now is an illustration of the kind of process that we undertook. And it ensured that we were creating something that was going to be impactful to the people who we found closest to the problem with professional learning, and that's teachers. We conducted 50 empathy interviews. We reviewed hundreds of studies and articles. And the first thing we did was we landed on the question that we wanted to answer. How might we define high-quality professional learning options grounded in the best evidence, practice, and models of effective professional learning for school systems that's going to actually result in increased achievement for students facing barriers of racism or poverty? We wanted to get very specific about the kind of professional learning we were looking to elevate and what that professional learning was going to do for folks. And here's what we learned along the way. And so this takes us now to the question that I just asked you a moment ago. What does effective professional learning look like? And we asked lots and lots of educators. And what I can see is that many of the qualities that I see coming up in the QA section, they resonate with what we heard from educators that we interviewed. Hopefully in the next few slides, you'll see the qualities and the features that you just shared with us in the Q&A section, and you'll see them resonate in what we learned throughout these empathy interviews. The first idea is that professional learning should be focused on relevant content. And we heard this time and time again. Teachers said, listen, I want to know professional learning that's focused on my subject area. I want it to help me to better understand the curriculum that I am using. One teacher said, I teach 8th grade math. Help me implement the lessons in this curriculum that I have in front of me. Teachers also said that professional learning needed to impact the reality of classrooms. When a teacher said that she had 2 new students, and she wanted to really be specific on how to incorporate strategies for multilingual learners in her math classroom. And many, many teachers talked about confusion sometimes with professional learning, and they were not always sure about how relevant the content was that they were learning. It didn't always seem to jive with the other priorities and practices that were being implemented across the school or the district. We also heard that professional learning should focus on teachers and students. And I know it sounds simple, but I can't tell you how often we heard professional learning decisions being made outside of the needs of teachers and students. So many teachers shared wanting to have a say in what professional learning would matter most to them and to their students. One teacher said, listen, respect me as a professional, make me think, challenge me and my students to grow. And most folks agreed at the end of the day, all they wanted was professional learning that was going to help their students the most. Another key idea that we learned through these empathy interviews was that the learning that's happening in professional learning needed to be immediately actionable. It had to translate into things people could do. So access to ongoing support at the school level was something folks really appreciated. Particularly coaching stood out as supported. Professional learning needed to meet the needs of students and adapt to the evolving content of curriculum over the course of the school year. One example of that, there was a first grade teacher who said, look, as my students become more and more independent readers, what can I do to remove the scaffolds that were necessary early in the school year so that I'm not in my students' way, that I'm giving them the space they need to grow as readers. And that was just so powerful. So listening to folks and the reality check that we got from people doing the hard work was honestly the most impactful part of our learning process. After we did all of these empathy interviews, our next step was to look at the existing research base. And not surprisingly, much of the research agreed with what we heard from teachers who were doing the work every day. The problem was that there was so much research available. So we decided to focus on what we thought was effective in terms of professional learning, and we defined effective as practices that either actually changed the way people did things in classrooms, and the second definition was that it actually resulted in increased student outcomes. And that's how we defined effective professional learning. And so here's what we learned through the research about effective professional learning practices. Effective professional learning must keep student learning as the center, the end goal. And professional learning is only effective if it results in positive changes for students. And that was a pretty bold statement, because I think about how much professional learning sometimes is fun or it feels good to adults, but doesn't actually end up making an impact on students. And this was really powerful. Another thing we learned about effective professional learning was from Ben Jensen and his team at Learning First. They did a study on high-performing school systems, and effective professional learning in those systems is seen as essential to the job of teaching. It was essential to the job of improving student learning. And I thought about that in contrast to what we heard from so many educators across the nation, that, you know, in some ways professional learning was a joke. I don't know if you've done it or not, but you want a good laugh or a good cry, Google teacher memes on professional development and professional learning experience. I mean, it's not a pretty picture. So in these high-performing systems, though, professional learning had a really great value to teachers. We also heard that effective professional learning really does take into the account of teacher voice in being able to design professional learning that matters to teachers and the reality of their job. And that really resonated. What we heard loud and clear from teachers was like, look, there's no time to waste. We don't have time that we need in our classrooms. We don't have time that we need to do the extracurricular things that we have to do. So professional learning cannot be a waste of what is already precious time. And then finally, we heard that and read and understood that effective professional learning addresses things like cultural bias, but in the context of actual pedagogy. So if you think about research-based, content-focused pedagogical knowledge, like how to facilitate a math talk, that's the context in which to think about how bias may play out in how math conversations happen in classrooms. Or another example could be thinking about the social emotional elements involved in learning and communicating, and actually discussing that when you're planning writing tasks or speaking listening tasks in your classroom. So what works, though, what we saw in the research about what works is actually not always happening. And to really change the game in professional learning, evidence-based practices need to become more widely accepted, and they have to replace some of our sacred, quote-unquote, best practices. All right, let's hear from you for a moment before we move into the next section. What is the most consistent challenge you've encountered in professional learning? What are the things that are just not effective or not working?
And again, go ahead and share that in the group chat so we can all discuss this together.
Oh, I'm seeing some ideas that we heard through the empathy interviews for sure. Sit and get, feeling like you didn't get anything out of the work, that it's not differentiated. Well, it's all too sad. And honestly, this is also what we heard through our empathy interviews, and I actually see so many of these similar thoughts from the group chat. Look at this, one and done, there's no follow through, or that it's difficult to devote time and attention to professional learning. There's so much going on. Someone here said it's not content specific, it's just generalized and not differentiated enough for my needs. And over we heard, it doesn't apply to my work. It's not going to change my practice. And that was just an overwhelming trend. So if the goal is to create professional learning experiences that change instruction to improve student outcomes, we have to remember that we also have to think about stopping some ineffective practices. And honestly, sometimes stopping things is much, much harder than starting new things. So what do we need to do to improve the quality and content of professional learning? Even though we know professional learning doesn't look the same across the nation, from classroom to classroom, district to district, whether it's coaching or PLCs or workshops or lesson studies, that is always going to have to vary to meet the needs of everyone. But what must be true no matter what, that's based on the research and also reinforces what people say actually works for them, certain things must be true. And so student achievement partners developed a set of non-negotiables, so to speak, that must be true of all high-quality, standards-aligned professional learning experiences. And I will say there's something simple in these principles, but deceptively challenging. The first is that professional learning needs to be content-focused. It really should be focused on the type of professional learning that's going to build teachers' knowledge, and that it's necessary for teachers to be able to teach the concepts of their discipline, whether it's mathematics or literacy or science or social studies. Your professional learning has to be focused in your content and your curriculum. With each of the principles, we also include a list of 4 to 5 descriptors of effective practices that really reflect each principle. We're not going to dig into those right now, but I'm going to encourage you at the end to kind of download the resource and get into those as you see fit. So this next principle is that professional learning must be teacher and student-centered, and that this is about adults having a collective responsibility for student learning, and that the culture for learning is alive and vibrant. And notice here that this principle says teachers and students-centered. We know that there are lots of other adults in support of student learning across roles, but all of those efforts need to be grounded in the teacher and student experience. And then finally, professional learning must be instructionally relevant and actionable. And it's got to be anchored in the daily work of teachers. And the daily work of teachers is a pretty kind of lather, rinse, repeat process of collaborative planning, getting into the classrooms and implementing work and lessons, some cycle of feedback and observation from colleagues or supervisors, and continuous cycles of inquiry that are always coming back to student learning. It's a really effective research-based practice that supports the work teachers have to do every single day. So principles, these are not a checklist where some things can be present or not, like, hey, we're teacher and student-centered, but, oh, no, we haven't figured out the content-focused part yet. What we know is that all principles need to be reflected in order to be effective for students' learning and for teacher experiences. So when you do get a chance, look at the principles for high-quality, standards-aligned professional learning. The introduction gives you a framing for why we approach this problem, and the principles talking about how we can make professional learning a better experience for everyone. Now, what does all this look like in practice? I always say that, you know, the last thing the world needs is another document, but maybe, right? But what we know is that this document should inspire action. So whatever your role is, whatever you are doing in a school system, there are ways that you can immediately take action towards changing professional learning in your school system. Claire, it looks like I'm looking for, well, I think we're going to skip this poll to make sure that we have time to hear from Robin and Mandy. But one of the resources that we include with the principles for professional learning are these guidance documents. They're called Principles into Practice. And these are very practical ideas for how anyone in a school system can take action And through our empathy interview process, we learned a lot from people out there working about what you can do. The teachers, you could simply gather grade level or grade band colleagues to dig into content-specific learning. You could take some foundational skills mini courses together or dig into the progressions documents on Achieve the Core with your colleagues. Coaches could create routines to do the math or read the text for every upcoming lesson with teachers that you support, and collaborate with teachers to design instruction on those problems and those tests. School leaders, you can set the expectation that all adults in the school building will hold positive views of student capabilities. You model this expectation through your words and actions and hold others accountable for their words and actions too. That's that collective responsibility. District leaders can think about how to develop strong processes for vetting the professional learning content that comes into the district, including content from external providers, just to make sure that it connects to the priorities and the vision set by the district. And states, you could spotlight the best practices across the states in professional learning so that other districts can learn from one another. So please download these documents and talk to your colleagues and see if there are ways that you can start to take action. Today, we have the pleasure of actually hearing from two folks who are living the principles right now in their roles in their local settings. We're going to talk to Robin. She's a district leader leading efforts to implement a district-wide adoption of core knowledge language arts curriculum. And Mandy is also here with us. She was a teacher leader who received high-quality professional learning and now works with others to spread the love. So Robin, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you are changing the game in professional learning in Sullivan County, Tennessee?
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Sullivan County is in Northeast Tennessee. We're a rural district, and we have about 9,000 students, and we have 11 elementary schools, all are Title I. And as far as staffing goes in our district, as far as elementary curriculum, it's me and one instructional coach with 11 elementary schools. So to think that I, number one, knew enough about the work, or number two, could handle all the work is an impossibility. So we had to bring in leaders and teachers to drive the work. And so as we built capacity among leaders and teachers and me, it just started to spread and ripple, and now we all own the work. So I'm excited to talk about the three principles and tie that in together that the participants have learned about so far. We got our reality check in spring of 2016 because a vendor contracted with TNTP, the New Teacher Project, to come into our district and conduct K2 walkthroughs. And they used the instructional practice guide from Achieve the Core. And we had some epiphanies because while our teachers were working really hard and were doing lessons better than I would have even taught when I was in the classroom, they were executing some great lessons, but we didn't know what we didn't know at that time. And so our instructional practice guide data showed us that only about 6% of our observed lessons were fully aligned to the Tennessee standards. And the Tennessee standards are very aligned to the Common Core standards, so we're all speaking pretty much the same language. So that was an epiphany. And then when they took student work samples, they captured pictures of those and started analyzing them for us. And we saw that our assignments were not aligned to standards, nor were the expectations high enough for any children. So that was a moment of shock and awe. And then we said, we've got to do something to deepen student learning and to provide equitable access to great instruction. So in fall of 2016, we had that gap of time between spring and fall to be able to bring teachers together and choose a curriculum. We had some different open source options there on the table. And so they, in conjunction with me, picked core knowledge language arts. But great professional learning and great curriculum can be curriculum agnostic. So it's not that I'd all think that that's always the way to go for everyone. But that's when our literacy revolution began. So we pulled in 24 pilot teachers. They were all K2, and they were from 3 elementary schools that had leaders who had early childhood backgrounds, because I knew I could not do it alone. And I had to bring in those 3 leaders and my instructional coach to help learn about reading instruction and then work with teachers to get where we needed to go. So after 4 years, that's where we are today. We do have increased student achievement. Our 3rd grade, while is stark at last year 30% on track and mastered in 3rd grade, after several years of children being in those core knowledge language arts classrooms, we showed a 6% growth this past year from the year before, and Tennessee showed 0. I think they had 0.5% growth in achievement in reading for third graders. So we're showing now, even though you can't do it for the numbers, we are showing now that we can tie the beautiful student work that is grade appropriate, grade level standards work to achievement. That, I'm so glad that all came to be. It was a moment of verification for us. So, and then increased student engagement. When you walked into our classrooms, before students were engaged, but now their engagement is literally jumping up out of their chairs to try to volunteer answers to questions like, why in the Renaissance did art become so important? And those are fifth graders talking about that. So, and because now we hold all children to high expectations, all children are accessing above grade level text through this new curriculum, we are seeing that children are far more able and ready to tackle things that we thought might in the past have been too challenging. And so I put a hashtag on the bottom of this slide, work in progress. So I feel honored to have even been invited to share our story, but certainly we are a work in progress. I personally am a very messy work in progress, but I'm honored to be here and would be glad to connect and learn from you all as well. So on the next slide, you'll see the high quality professional learning triangle in the center that Rochelle just talked to you about. And so I always say willy-nilly. So willy-nilly, some people don't use that terminology, I guess, if you're not from the South, I'm not sure, but willy-nilly was our haphazard approach to professional learning in the past. And it was just like some of the characteristics you all were sharing in the beginning about sit and get and seemed meaningless and seemed to not have purpose. All of those things I think we could describe. And while we were all well-intentioned, again, we didn't know what we didn't know. So with this partnership with the New Teacher Project, they were able to help me build strategy around implementing this high-quality curriculum. And it's just like a coin. If one side of the coin is high-quality curriculum, you have to flip the coin over and support that high-quality curriculum, support those teachers with professional learning. So on the left side, you'll see the three characteristics of high-quality professional learning. The first one is teacher and student-centered. So when we brought in our teachers, we had to create a no-shame zone. And I always joke, but it's real. After 8 years of therapy, I think I finally have the no-shame thing down. And so I am able to be transparent and vulnerable and bring in my tribe of people together who I love so much and let them know they're safe and that they are able to talk to me and press back on me. But as long as we're holding kids and teachers and myself to high expectations, we can hash it out. So we just created a family of those 24 game changers is what I called them, the first 24 pilots. So they were safe, and they came in, and we just knew that we all had unfinished learning around literacy. So it came from, we call it the vertical spine. So at the district level, I didn't know about teaching reading. At the leader level, principals didn't know about how to teach reading, and teachers certainly didn't receive the training in their PP programs. So we were all pretty much at ground zero, unfortunately. But remember, no shame zone. So teachers, we used their voice to inform the strategy. So they would come in and they would learn about the materials, then they would go back and use them. And we were learning science of reading as we were using the materials. So we'd had to jump in once we got the stark realization that it was, 6% of our lessons were aligned. So they would go out, and it was almost like action research. They would implement the materials, and then I would send them a survey, and they would answer the survey questions and talk about problems of practice and obstacles and things that we needed to equip them with. And so we would bring them back together, and we would start with what are those problems of practice? How can we either answer them or get through them or eliminate them? Because eliminating problems is always a great thing, too. We brought them together at that same time, and we prepped for the unit and lessons coming. And because you don't have to prepare and write, prepping is just, a matter of sitting down and looking at designing it with the end in mind. And then we learned a new skill. So we looked at the instructional practice guide, and we said, what is our next best step? So even in year 4, we're just now getting to the point where we're making sure every skills lesson has explicit skills instruction, practice out of context, practice in context. So we take the curriculum and we walk through exactly what does that look like. And then now we're also looking at the tasks we're giving to students, and we're aligning those with our assessments. So even though we don't want to play the TN Ready game, we do want our children to be prepared so that they have all this background knowledge and all these foundational skills that they can tackle that TN Ready, but even more importantly, tackle life and the text that life presents in front of them. So we do use student work and data to inform our strategy. We had a drastic reduction in the percentage of children who were scoring below. Those children are rising as well. That just shows what high expectations for all means. And then we look at those strengths and needs to inform our strategy. Then on the bottom, I'll try to go quicker because Mandy has lots of great information to share as well. But at the bottom, professional learning is content focused. We were not able to tackle or eat the whole elephant at one time. So our one most important bite of eating that elephant one bite at a time was literacy. So all of our professional learning for the last 4 years, if you were a teacher of reading, you have learned and taught me a lot about the science of reading. You have learned a lot about implementation of the materials and how teachers apply the art of teaching to the strong foundation, which is the science of teaching. So now that teachers have this strong curriculum, they can do the most beautiful work that they were trained and in their hearts to do, is to actually meet the needs of kids while not lowering the bar. And that's where no book can teach you how to do that. So, and then all professional learning is grounded in the belief. I started this hashtag 4 years ago, but my hashtag is They Will Rise, because while I believe my teachers will rise to face any challenge and to tackle this hard work, I brought my teachers together and I said, if I don't put limits on you, don't you dare put limits on kids. So our hashtag as a district is They Will Rise. And then on the right, professional learning, instructionally relevant and actionable. This is something as a principal I never did well, was I might have used this vague rubric to go in and evaluate teachers. But then what did I do with it, and did I support them with a small piece that they could go back and implement in their classrooms and have those conversations? So teachers join together at schools, but they also join together at grade levels at the district. And so we have built this family. It takes about 1 hour to drive from one school to the farthest other school. So our district is rural and wide, but they all know each other. So all the fifth grade teachers in our district come together, and we do some of that work I talked about first. So then also, though, part of that is we have to use a parallel professional learning model because our leaders have to come in. It's almost like pre-teaching our leaders, and then I work with the teachers. And then they all are talking the same common language. They have the same expectations. But leaders are learners right along with the teachers, and that helps a lot with the transparency and vulnerability and all of us as a family working to reach the dream of every child reading. So our leaders do use the instructional practice guide as our walk-through tool, and we focus in on a particular core action. So right now, we're just looking at core action 2 and 3, or 3 and 4, where we just want to make sure children are doing the thinking, giving precise answers. So that's just like our next steps for this year. So then teachers are provided with their one next best step. So rather than this huge vague rubric that captures every kind of possible component of observation, this is just what is the one next best step that I can do to help kids. Excuse me. And then the principals also just facilitate grade level literacy PLCs. And the PLCs really do happen. You know, I used to say, oh, yeah, we have PLCs in my building. But this is all content-based, high-quality professional learning, just like we've been talking about. So I think that's what I have to share, and I'll be glad to answer questions at the end or reach out in any way, and I'll help any way I can.
Robin, thank you so much. There was full of so many strategies and concrete steps you could take at a district level that actually helps people. All right, Mandy, we can't wait to hear from you. I'll turn it over to you now, Mandy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mandy Flora, and I work at Teaching Lab as an ELA fellow and project manager, which just means that I support districts and school leaders and teachers with curriculum-specific professional learning. In my case, I support EL education. I'm going to explore these principles today with you through a story. So I'd like you to picture this, participants. You've just been given a job to support professional learning aligned to the standards for 4 districts. They're very different, and you're fresh from the classroom. You have a million ways and ideas to improve it because, as some of those memes that Rochelle mentioned, you know, you've thought about my favorite one, where you think if death comes now, I'll be closer to it because the change is settled or something like that. So you have lots of ways to improve professional learning, but you run up against years of bureaucracy. You spin your wheels tirelessly developing sessions by teachers, school, district, and state request. You find yourself contributing to and inside of initiative fatigue, and you're just looking for some way to ground these decisions that you're making a mile a minute and insert these principles for standards aligned professional learning. So this story is where I found myself a few years ago. And to me, if I'd had the principles, I'd be in a much different place. I like to connect the principles here that Student Achievement Partners has put together back to the ELA and math shifts. So probably many of you have experienced the 3 shifts for either ELA and math. And for me, those PD resources and shifts produced what felt for me as a former regional service agency PD director in West Virginia to be a way to shift the paradigm. So other than large convenings for core advocates, I had no network. Our state was very anti-Common Core at the time. So while I made a lot of mistakes delivering those sessions that SAP had put together around the shifts, such as packing a room full of 70 K-12 teachers for one and done sessions, that content foundation was still there. So those shifts were non-negotiable, which allowed me to be clear, which eventually led me to co-founding West Virginia's Labs, which was a better start for professional learning by being content focused. So you'll see on the screen just a visual to show what happened a few years ago. Those initial labs in West Virginia did grow rapidly and drastically changed teacher practice and student achievement because they were teacher and student centered, but they weren't as relevant as they could have been because the teachers didn't have those high quality materials adopted in their districts to return to after the inquiry cycle labs were finished. So these high quality professional learning principles remind me of those starting days. In the spirit of inquiry, I would submit that we are all still very much at the start of something in one way or another. You know, we're scanning our environment for a framework and a foundation, kind of like Robin said with that IPG. I think of that as a foundation for you all. And that brings top of mind to me those new Common Core standards days that even with the best intentions, professional leaders and designers and users, you know, alike we're all making inefficient and ineffective decisions because we didn't have this normed, research-based, cohesive principle to return to check ourselves up against, like the shifts. So on the next slide, I'm going to advance here. On the next slide shows how, you know, we've found at Teaching Lab that professional learning needed something like the shifts to dramatically change the paradigm for teacher professional learning. At Teaching Lab, we've put these principles into practice through our core model. We've improved upon what we've learned in West Virginia and lots of other places, lots of other early founders other than me out there, some of them on the call tonight. And we describe those as head, heart, and habits. So head, focused on core academic content, helps us remain content focused and relevant. Heart helps us to stay teacher focused by eventually helping build up teacher leaders to develop those or to run those inquiry cycles in their communities. And habits helps us stay student focused and actionable. So next I'd like you to look at the screen and think of just some places where that may have happened to you. If you're a designer, if you're a teacher, if you're a PL leader, where if some of these principles aren't in place, this is what can happen. So we're really excited at Teaching Lab to use and reference the principles as a foundation with district and state partners to strengthen this approach. We've already seen excitement and growth in professional learning plans from our partners in over 20 school systems in 4 states. Recently, Rochelle was gracious enough to send us an advanced copy of the principles because we were leading sessions with Nebraska. So Nebraska has done this wonderful thing where they've pulled together a fellowship of 90 regional and district leaders and teachers. And they're thinking about, as they implement their new high quality instructional materials, they're also considering professional learning at the same time. We know that states have such an important role to play to enable these conditions, like our policies, the way their districts engage with vendors. So it's just great to have these principles like the shifts to really ground those decisions. Our vision eventually is to help guide these decision makers to be as clear about their criteria for professional learning as they are for instructional materials. I'd like to close with just saying that clear is kind. I'm looking forward to being a part of this network that continues to share these principles far and wide, to be just clear about what works and what doesn't work in standards-aligned professional learning. And so just thinking about the participants that are here tonight, to thread the needle back to my initial story, I wonder what other rogue, unsupported core advocates, teachers, and leaders are out there scouring the internet or sitting in your future sessions ready to build cities and communities on top of this solid foundation that the principles provide for us, for teachers and kids in our schools. And I'll kick it over to Michelle.
Mandy, thank you so much. I'm looking in the group chat, and I mean, the love for you and Robin's coming through loud and clear, and head, hearts, and habits as a mindset is really resonating with people. Thank you both so much for sharing. One thing I want to point you to before we move to questions and answers is just all the resources that are available to support the work you all are taking on. The principles document itself is available to you. Mandy mentioned taking that right up to the state leaders and working that into how they were thinking about designing professional learning. We've also assembled other supplemental resources that might help. An example of that is Understanding Language out of Stanford. They created professional development essentials that were designed to assist professional development plans specifically for educators of multilingual learners. So it's like the principles for high quality professional learning, but in the specific context of multilingual learners. So those are the types of things you'll find in the supplemental research and tools document. And another piece that we included is the Annotated Bibliography. We wanted to make sure that all of the research that we sifted through is available for learning and for supporting effective system policies. So all of that research is there and available to you in the Annotated Bibliography. All right, so what we encourage you to do is get on to Achieve the Core, and download the principles and all of those principles into practice documents and all of the other resources that we provide so that you can start shaking things up in professional learning in the ways that we heard Mandy and Robin describe to us as well. All right, I'm going to stop now and open up for questions for our guests. We've had a very active and vibrant group chat and a QA queue. And so, Claire, let me know if we've got any questions for Robin or Mandy or myself about either the resources or what they heard about the experiences happening in schools and districts.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you again, everyone who presented. I'm always in awe of the brain power and expertise that our guest presenters bring, so it's been really wonderful to learn from you. So we do have some questions that have already come in. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to ask your question yet, it's the purple little Q&A button. If you want to ask a question to any of the presenters, we'll get to as many as we can. So we do have some questions that have come in during the course of the webinar. And I think the first one I want to kick off with is a question about differentiated professional learning. So I think it's been pretty clear from the presentation that professional learning should be content specific. So you should be looking at ELA material if you're an ELA instructor. But deeper than that, beyond that, what kind of differentiation would you all recommend for professional learning? Should it be grade specific? How deep should that differentiation go?
Well, I will take the first step just from what we saw from some of the research we looked at, and then I would happily pass to Robin or Mandy to elaborate on that kind of from a practical perspective. One of the research descriptors in the principles encourages organizing teachers either by subject. So if you're maybe in a setting where there are not many teachers on your grade level, however, there are 4 high school literacy teachers, to at least organize folks by content, and whenever possible to organize folks by grade level so that there can be learning around a certain common set of materials or goals for students. That was really clear in the research.
I think
anyone else want to jump in on that one? Oh, go ahead.
Sure. In our district, we took the approach of it has to be content specific because that was our first bite of the elephant. So, of course, it was literacy. But then we also had to do pulled grade levels together because some schools only had one fourth grade ELA teacher. So we would pull them together so that they would build that common language across the whole district of, well, if this is the Renaissance, how am I going to unpack this unit? Where's my destination? So just last week, I brought our principals together, and one of them said, I think we're to the point now after 4 years, it's time to start thinking about differentiating learning even around the curriculum. So now when we talk to our teachers about the one next best step, they can say, hey, I need to know more about shifting the cognitive lift in my questions. So I need to just practice scaffolding questions so that if children aren't right there, right there with me, I can build in these support questions. That might be one small group's professional learning. So while I'm not a genius and told you I'm a learner, I learn and listen to my people. So the next steps for us are going to be talking to teachers. What do you need? You know that here are the components of the instructional practice guide. Show us where we can support you and then start breaking them down into smaller groups. So I think we're now to the point where we can perform surgery on what teachers say they need, and then we can help meet their needs. And we have not done the work in math yet because I'm almost dead, not really, but kind of. But we are starting to inch into math. We've started working with some high-quality materials there, but y'all, all I can handle is literacy right now. So there's my 2 cents.
That's super helpful.
Mandy.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to pop in and say, I think for us, one of the things to think about is what can be differentiated upon use. So what is what's the knowledge we all need to build? That's how we do it in our knowledge building cycles. But, if we're gathering student evidence, then that's differentiated upon who is using it. So that's one thing to think about in design.
Wonderful. So I have another question that's come. It's actually a theme of questions. I see a couple of different questions on this topic. And Robin, I might toss it to you first, because you shared a little bit about the evidence of success with student learning and student achievement that you've seen, and evidence of what you're seeing in the classroom changing as a result of professional learning. Several folks have written in and asked about just how you determine the effectiveness of the professional learning that you're delivering, whether it's resulting in change, what data you're using to measure that. I think some folks have mentioned that ESSA has requirements around showing evidence of effectiveness. So if you have any thoughts, and if you want to kick us off here, any thoughts on understanding effectiveness?
I think effectiveness is measured for us when we conduct our walkthroughs with the instructional practice guide. So we work with principals. We would meet on a site, and we would tell the teachers, we're just here to learn. We're not here to bring a bunch of people into your classroom and make you feel stressed. But we could use that walkthrough tool and have a common language and build our own understanding of what literacy practices look like. So we would walk in. So that's where we took our greatest pulse, was seeing, are the strategies they've been learning about being implemented in this classroom? And I was never the teacher that my teachers are when I taught for 10 years. So I'm affirming them and cheerleading them on, but then I'm like, what's our one next best step? So that also can be measured, because when the principal goes back to talk and coach and observe the teacher, just in little snippets of 15 or 20 minutes, the principal can see, has the teacher then applied what was my one next best step? Have I used it? And then what is the next best step? So it's just like a journey that they're on together. And as long as there's no shame or fear involved, then, they are rising. I think that's the best way. And then we survey teachers, because the professional learning has to be driven by what they need, but it's also grounded in really great instructional materials, because we're not going to play willy-nilly anymore.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that one? Otherwise, I'll move to the next question. All right. Mandy, I think I'm going to direct this question to you, because you gave us that great example of some of your earlier professional learning that you felt, while maybe it wasn't the ideal design, did lay a really great foundation of the shifts for future professional learning. And so this person has written in and asked about the balance of sort of the concepts and then the strategies, that her teachers are really hungry and they're really excited and eager for strategies, but they aren't really that interested in the theory or some of the essential understandings necessary to effectively use the strategies. So what recommendations do you have for achieving that balance?
I think that's really interesting without some foundational structures in place. You know, we use the inquiry cycles as a way to first learn new content and unpack the why to get underneath the research. But I think if you're in that beginning place, you know, I think it's just fine and acceptable to ask teachers to try something out that is more aligned to the standards, that will illustrate to them some of these shifts and some of the research that's going to inform what they're doing, their practice. For me, just very frankly, what I did is I just asked 4 teachers to try something out for 4 weeks and report back to me. And then we use that as a foundation to unpack the evidence and unpack the theory behind it. So I think that's an okay starting place.
Great. All right. Well, I think we are marching towards the end of our webinar, so I'm just going to pose one more question that I hope everyone can weigh in on. It's a hard question, but I think you all could answer it, which is, what would you say is the highest leverage action step to turn professional learning around, improve it, really raise that bar for professional learning? So maybe, Rochelle, we can start with you.
Oh, this is a trick question. I have like 3 answers to that one, but what I will say is I think that the highest leverage action step is probably getting really high quality instructional materials in the hands of teachers. Because then professional learning is about how to make the best of some really thoughtful resources. And that has the potential for elevating even really solid teaching practices to a whole nother level, especially if teachers are not having to pursue how to supplement or how to, you know, professional learning that's going to help them figure out scaffolding strategies. If all of that is baked into really high quality materials, then the places professional learning can go are about kids and what to do to bring high quality materials to every single student in the classroom. I'll pass it over to Mandy next.
I would just +1 that, which we can always use a +1, right? Just that if we don't have high quality instructional materials in place, then the rest of it won't really fly. So that to me is the first step and the highest leverage step. After that, I think one, you know, as a rogue person, I really like to be rogue sometimes, is to just try to find your champions early on. I think Robin illustrated that as well. You know, who are the 4 to 5 teachers that people look up to who will go and give something a shot, because they will really be your leaders who will transform it after that. So I think, you know, those are 2 things. One, make sure that the high quality instructional materials are in place, and the other is to leverage the social capital around you.
Robin? Bring us home, girl.
I agree with you. Okay, I'm going to do a good one. So, you know, I'm a weirdo about analogies, but so like I tell my teachers all the time, the strong curriculum is the foundation of the house. So if we don't pour the footers and have the right curriculum in place, whatever that may be, as long as it's high quality, we're rolling. But then the teachers are so the curriculum pours the footers, but the teachers build the house. So the teachers and leaders are the one who gets the work done. And because it's already, the footers are poured, the teachers can build a house with so much more art and beauty and finesse while still building the house to rise, like I said 100 times, high expectations for all children. When you walk out of our classrooms, you want to walk out and say, I have no idea what child is in what subgroup, because every one of them can talk masterfully about what we're just learning. I think it's a beautiful picture that all comes together, but there are foundational pieces.
Well said. So thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you for being such wonderful participants. The group chat was extremely active, and it really made us feel like we were all together discussing this. So really appreciated what you brought to this webinar as participants. And thank you also to our wonderful presenters sharing your expertise, sharing your experiences. This has really been helpful. So just a quick reminder about joining our network. You have the link to join if you aren't already a member of the Core Advocate Network in your resource widget. There are some other ways that you can follow us, our website. We are also on Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest. And again, you'll have these slides, so if you want to look us up later, you'll have that access. And then we invite you to join us for next month's webinar, which is Comparing Reading Research to Program Design. We have another new report out that looked at compared research to Teachers College units of reading and writing. And so we'll be digging into that report next month. And so we hope you'll join us. So thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.